So what I'm hearing here, it's a question of asking, asking the right questions and asking the right people.
But it is also giving people a sense that you'll be doing something worthy of their investment.
Yes, yes.
And what I've begun to realize that there was a significant deficit of hope. I am giving a lot of people on and off campus hope that this university can be turned around, and hope that the university can serve the nation in a significant way, educationally and economically. So people are willing to invest not only because they're asked, but because I'm saying integrity matters.
Yes.
And I want to be able to account for the money that you give me. I'm saying accountability matters. And so we've got to do things differently within the university to be able to explain what the money was spent for. I'm saying the transparency matters. It's not always nice stuff, but it is our stuff. So let's talk about it.
Yes.
Some of it is going to make us uncomfortable. Some of it is going to be personally offensive, because we'll have to talk about things which may be run against the practices of individuals, which practices have been injurious to the institution. But we have to talk about it. And we've got to let people understand that there's an opportunity to make a behavior modification or exercise options about other affiliation.
In cultural news, I saw a headline. On a consumer concern, supporting Professor Griffith's UT Renaissance will create a unified and modern nation. How accurate is that?
Well, you got to ask the guy who wrote it. I can only give you. I didn't write it. I can only give you my view. I think what Mr. Patliao, he came to me at that first Turkine talks, which focused on Brexit. We had 219 people there. As a matter of fact, we've outgrown the location we started using, which was Duke Lodge. A good friend of my wife and myself, Jerry Govaya, who has been one of the corporate sponsors of the Turkine talks. He, for example, is one of the sponsors. I started, I don't know if you noticed, I started a competition for a golden Jubilee song. He underwrote he provided part of the prize. A Guyanese in Canada won it. Liliane Jour, I think is her name. And so Mr. Padial came to me at that. He said, Vice Chancellor, I am seeing what you're doing. I know this society. Don't let them drive you crazy. They're going to try to do all sorts of things to undo your progress. And so we chatted for a few minutes. I know of him because when I grew up in Guyana, he was a very active consumer advocate. Padial got to be in his late 80s now, but he's still an active. So I remember his picture from as a kid growing up in Guyana. He was always there in the newspapers. We didn't have TV at the time, so he was always there, newspaper and the news, on the radio, pressing issues of consumer consciousness, consumer advocacy. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that he wrote, in my view, a very prescient observation in Culture News. Because if we do not succeed in rebuilding a University of Guyana, the prospect of our enabling educational development to be buttressing economic development, that prospect is going to be severely jeopardized.
So this could be a national security issue.
It is an educational security, an economic security issue. If we don't get this right, we have a whole lot of things that we will not be able to get right.
Right off the bat, frank talk. What are 3 challenges that you confront or confront you every day?
I used to give a book when I was a dean in Florida, and I was provost in Virginia. A book entitled A is for Attitudes. One of the biggest challenges is the attitude challenge. And some of it is understandable. Morale has been so low. People have had to be practitioners of the science of muddling through. And so it's whatever. It's, I don't really care. It's getting people to see that there is a new paradigm of which they can be excited to help to rebuild. That is still a work in progress. But I must tell you that I can see demonstrable, not only vocal indications of change, but I can see adjustment in some attitudes. And partly because I've been quite candid. Transparency. This is how I'm recommending we do it. You don't have to stay here and do it, but if you're going to stay here, you have to do it. I remember getting a call from an alum in Canada, Mr. Harry Hergash. He graduated, I think, in 1969. He said, Vice Chancellor, I am so happy to see that after decades of neglecting these students with delayed grades, you're doing something about it. I said, if you want to be a teacher at this university, your obligation does not end when the exams are given. Your obligation ends when the grades are turned in. You're getting paid for the whole kit and caboodle. Turn the grades in. If not, and I made a proposal to a certain governance committee, he adopted the proposal. We have got to look each other in the eye and say, we are no longer going to be comfortable with A and B and C, and we're going to do something about it. So beginning this semester, people who don't turn their grades in, there are a number of sanctions we're going to begin to impose on them. And again, I'm transparent about it. The decision was made in July. We publicized it. So you can't say you didn't know. And I've had the conversations with the unions. I started meeting with both the unions on a monthly basis, meet with the student government leadership. You can't say you didn't know. Just do your part. Because the new dispensation is we got to respect these students. We've got to respect our own professionalism.
There are many who will join me in saying that when describing Professor Griffith, excellence comes, one of the words that come up. And there's a quote that I got from you that have become part of my own repertoire. It says, it's by Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. Professor, I'm asking you this now. What is it that you repeatedly do that has sort of taken you or given you this level of excellence that we see?
My maternal grandmother was from St. Lucia. She was an immigrant. And I think if you are part of an immigrant community that is not wealthy, and you're part of an immigrant community that is not wealthy, where you are constantly told you should not be comfortable with being good. You've got to aim for something better than good. Even cultivate that value. And so from my growing up, I was never comfortable, was never allowed to be comfortable with mediocrity. And so for me, it is how do I do a little better tomorrow than I may have done yesterday? How may I motivate students or others to do better and to dream bigger? My wife and I were in the Essequibo a couple of weeks ago. Beautiful resort. You should go if you go to Guyana next time. The Arowai Resort.
Arowai?
Arowai. It's right at the confluence of the Mazaruni and the Cuyuni rivers. Flying to Bartica, and then you can 2 minutes across. And I got an email from a student of mine from 1995. And she said, Professor Griffith, I've been following you. I just want you to know that now I am the acting consul general of Trinidad in New York. Part of my success had to do with you. Whenever you come to New York, she doesn't know that although I'm the Vice Chancellor of Guyana, University of Guyana, I still have a home in New York. It is looking back and seeing the encouragement for excellence that you gave to your students. It is looking back to see how over the decades people can say, I credit your not being comfortable with me doing good. I have a former student from York who is a big-time attorney right here in New York. And I remember once when I was in Florida, every time he came to Florida, he would come look me up. And once my wife and I were going to Europe for something, we stopped on the way back in New York. He took us to a dinner at a place that I could not afford. And he told her in my presence why I am on his pedestal. He said, Professor Griffith, he wouldn't give me a grade. The first paper I did, he would make a whole bunch of corrections and said, take this and you can do better. He was telling her that it angered me sometimes because this was a mature guy, came out of the army, thought he knew it all. But he said it was not until I was about to graduate, and then when I went to law school, I realized the value of not allowing yourself, especially you're a young black man, to be comfortable with being good. I'm not going to tell you his name, but when we moved back to New York from Virginia, he did the closing hours. He refused to take any money. But he told his partner, if he comes to you and tell you anything but fees, don't listen to him. It is those, and I can recount many others. Yes. I'll tell you one more. That allows me to see the value of my pursuing excellence at a personal level and encouraging others to think big, to do big things. Sometimes, even though you think you may not have it. I'll give you one example. When we were in New York here before we left to go to Virginia, not a former student of mine from FIU, one of my best students, he was getting married. Dr. G, I'm getting married. You have to tell me what days are good for you for us to set this wedding, because we have to be this wedding. So we set a date. My wife and I went down. It was in Clearwater, Florida. So we're in the church, and the wedding party's coming in. And the groom is being escorted by his father. The father nods to me. I nodded back. I never met the father. I assumed that it's the father. So the wedding is over. Went to the reception. Father came looking for me. Father said, Dr. G, I'm so glad you were able to come, because if you did not come, and I'm not going to call his name, X would have been so disappointed. His father told me, he said, X has two heroes, and I am not one of them. What? You and Colin Powell are the two heroes of my son. And then sitting at the dinner table, my wife and I were there. There was a woman next to me talking about, this person is always talking with Professor Griffith. I got to meet this professor. She was sitting right next to me. It is when you know that you have made a difference in the lives of people, in enabling them not to be comfortable with being good, because in your lifetime you were encouraged not to be comfortable. And as I said, when I said to the medical students last week, there are many people who are going to expect you to be mediocre because you're a bit black, or because you're Indian, or because you're female, or you may have a disability. Defy their expectations. You got to habituate. Does it mean you get everything perfect every time? No.
Mhm.
But if you accept just being good and okay,
Yes.
it's going to define how you see yourself and what you pursue.
This drive for excellence, this determination to extract excellence from those around you or those in your charge. What is your deepest concerns or fears, if there's any, about being able to get that out of the University of Guyana?
My worry is that the insufficiencies and neglect of the university have been so long-standing and deep
Yes.
that if we don't work with a sense of urgency, I keep quoting Martin Luther King Jr. He gave a speech right here in New York, 1962, Trinity Church. He talked about a fierce urgency of now.
Mhm.
This university has a phase because so much has been neglected for so long, and there is so much to be done that, for me, we can't slacken.
Mm.
And my worry is that if I'm not able to help people change attitudes and win new converts to the Renaissance journey, we are going to be lagging and not meeting the milestones that are necessary. But so far, I think we're moving under the circumstances that it's been only 6 months, not even 6 months fully. I'm proud that we've made significant gains, and we've got to win the support of many more people in Guyana. And we absolutely have to have the support of the diaspora. I have made it pellucid that whether it's the educational sector or the health sector or the agriculture sector, Guyana cannot be rebuilt only by Guyanese and others within Guyana.
Are you looking, willing to accept academic partnerships from Guyanese in the diaspora?
Has to be. Not only Guyanese in the diaspora, but other nationals. About a month ago, we had the first meeting of the feasibility study team to set up a business school. It's not led by Guyanese. It's led by an African American from Clark, Atlanta, dean of the business school there. It's not a team only of Guyanese. The deputy director of the Mona School of Business in Jamaica is a member of the team. Dr. David Lewis from Manchester Trade International Business Advisors is a member of the team. So I think the necessity is for us to look to build partnerships and to leverage relationships where those relationships are possible and intending to be helpful. Some relationships you don't want to have because they want to take you in a direction that is not helpful to your own interests. But this past Tuesday, I had a very productive meeting with the High Commission of Canada. I had dinner, he, me, Francine, and his wife had dinner 2 weeks ago at his residence. And we said, as soon as we return, he was traveling, I was traveling, we'll get together and talk specifics. How can Canada help rebuild the university? I had breakfast 2 Wednesdays ago with the US ambassador, which was the second meeting. He's coming on the 16th of December with a team to focus on specifics. So we've got to find ways to build the partnerships both with academic, non-academic institutions. And some of the partnerships, for example, with the diplomatic community, they're going to leverage academic entities, some of whom are headed or influential persons within them are Guyanese.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So it is both how do you, academic, non-academic, business, non-business, bring the relationship resources to bear to help the university. And that is not, and it's not a one-shot deal. It's a deal where you've got to tap the talent, you've got to tap the time, you've got to tap the treasure of individuals. Next Friday, for example, I'm having a Skype conference with two senior folks, one of whom is Guyanese, one of whom is not Guyanese. At the university I spent 12 years at, still have strong friendships there, Florida International. The project is how can we help the University of Guyana to get something that is a critical interest of mine. A Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning.
Wow.
You've got to get it. Because, and I was making the point in relation to the medical school. I want to tell you a little bit about medical school in a minute. Whether it's medicine or engineering, the fact that you may be a good doctor or a good engineer doesn't mean you know how to teach medicine or engineering. And the University of Guyana has neglected enabling its lecturers to know how to do a better job. And it's not just about your teaching, it's about, is there learning? What are the modern pedagogical ways of enabling learning? What are the facilities? And so I called these two friends at FIU, said, yeah. As a matter of fact, one, who's the vice president, one to come and said, slow down, wait a minute, don't come yet, let's talk first. So that when you come, you can bring adequate to start the ball rolling. We've got to look beyond Guyana. About a month ago, had a powerful breakfast session with the Consultative Association of Guyanese Industry, headed by Yesu Prasad. Yesu is a benefactor of the university. He and I are talking about other ways he can be helpful. And right after that breakfast, I went to meet the European Union ambassador. He had specific things. He said, first of all, Vice Chancellor, what is a Vice Chancellor? And what is a Chancellor? And who is a Chancellor? And I began to say to people that I've been getting that question so many times, I'm going to put in my new business cards, President in parentheses. Because not only are people in North America, but even people in Europe, the concept of a Vice Chancellor being the person in charge, whether the Chancellor is not a person in charge,
yes.
It's just confusing. And so the ambassador and I spoke specific ways in which European Union resources can be helpful. So it is not leveraging only Guyanese. I have the value of having a broad network in the Caribbean, in Europe, in North America, in Latin America. And so I'm using that network, some of which are not Guyanese, to be able to help the university.
If you could go back in time to the beginning of this tenure, what would you tell yourself, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself 6 months ago?
I would tell myself there's a phrase from back in the 80s that you might want to embrace more. And that phrase is, and it was a phrase coined during the Reagan years in relation to dealing with the Soviet Union. Trust but verify. Because, people make all sorts of promises.
Yes.
And I want to come to that, and this is one of my kind of disappointments. A lot of people who have made a lot of platitudinous references to the importance of the university and the value, and they've made pledges, but they have not been honoring those pledges. So I want to say to anyone who is in the viewing range or listening range, if you made a promise to me or you made a promise to the University of Guyana, I tend to like people who keep their promises. You didn't have to make them, but you made it, honor it.
Yes.
So I would remind myself that sometimes people are exuberant about their commitment platitudinously, but then they tend to lag practically. Sometimes you've got to verify whether that commitment is a commitment you should generally just trust without reservation.
You started to, or you made reference to the medical school.
Mm-hmm.
What is it you wanted to tell us about for that particular faculty?
Well, the medical school reaccreditation has been and still is one of my top 10 goals for the first year. And I was delighted that not only did I ask for, but I received an additional subvention from the government, the 109, actually it's $109.83 million, but then who's counting? I was able to use a good amount of that money towards making improvements in the Faculty of Social Health Sciences, in the Faculty of Health Sciences across the board, but in the School of Medicine. Just to pay for the reaccreditation site visit is a whole lot of money that we didn't have. The improvements, and then we had the misfortune of having a fire in the Health Sciences Complex. A fire which incidentally is a reflection of some of those absence of quality issues. Your electrical work was done, not done properly, and so a year later on you had a fire. I have been also making the point that the restoration of accreditation to the medical school is not just a School of Medicine project, it's a university-wide project, because if we cannot restore confidence educationally and psychologically in getting the medical school reaccredited, it's going to undermine so many other elements of the Renaissance. People's willingness to give you private money is going to be cautioned by that. People's willingness to invest confidence and trust your encouragement is going to be tempered. So for me, I'm delighted that we made not only significant gains on campus, we still have a long journey to travel, but some of our critical partners, particularly the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation, Dr. Max Hanneman fully understands. I did a visit to the hospital, spoke with all the heads of departments concerned. They've got a lot of issues too, but they're committed to doing what they can to help moving that project along. So this past week, we had a site visit. Began on Sunday. I have a dinner at the Vice Chancellor's residence, which, by the way, I'm calling Renaissance House. So when you come to Ghana, you gotta come to Renaissance House. And what I did there was I brought some of the critical stakeholders. Junior Minister of Health was there. Members of the council were there. Major General Joe Singh, Mr. Vincent Alexander, who was a technical advisor to the Minister of Education. The student leaders were there. We had a history made at this year's Turkine graduation. First time ever someone for the medical school was a valedictorian.
Wow.
I had him there at the dinner. People from the university, people from the community, and I wanted to let the site visitors know that this restoration project is embraced not only by me, but by the ministry, by the civic community, by the students. And so we ended on Wednesday afternoon with the exit interview. I'm not going to say publicly we're going to get reaccreditation, but all the signals. For example, we had more commendations and transitional notes of applause than criticisms. So I think we're working to a point where in January we're going to hear what their assessment is. They'll send us a draft report for us to comment. That will be an indication of where things stand. And then in July, when the full accreditation board meets, we'll hear definitively. But I have reason to be optimistic that putting a lot of energy into that was worth it. Mindful of the fact that we still have a long journey to go. And I made a point. I held a meeting right after the site visit team exit. They left with about 12 folks from the university. And I said, the journey continues. The team may have left, even if, as I expect us to get reaccreditation, we know we have a lot of work to do. And so I asked, let's get an implementation matrix now that says, here is what we need to do on this. Here is who is doing it. Here is the deadline by which we can have it. So we can have a dashboard of action. Because November 23rd, the end of the site team visit, does not the end of the journey make. We still have a lot of stuff to do in terms of getting full-time faculty in the medical school.
On that note, a reaccredited medical faculty, fully restored or improved medical faculty. Describe what that means to the university, to the morale of the university, the psychology of the country, to have a medical school that attracts foreign students in abundance. What is that?
It means several things in practical terms. It means that the students who graduate from a non-accredited medical school have a limit, geographic boundary on the places where they can practice without jumping through some other hoops. So for example, if you're a Guyanese and you want to move and practice in Jamaica, you can't do that. You've got to take another exam. If you're Jamaican graduating from the Guyana Medical School, you want to go back home and practice, you've got to take another exam. So there's a practical limit to any graduate from the medical school on where you can practice without jumping through not only some stress hoops, but for some financial hoops you got to pay. But you quite rightly adverted to another element. A medical school of any university, even one that is not at the apogee of its institutional existence, is an icing on a university cake. And to have that icing on the cake be tarnished by not having accreditation says something about the whole cake.
Yes.
The cake is not worthy of full respect and full consumption. And which is why I've been saying the restoration of accreditation is a university-wide product, because it's going to affect our branding and imaging. It's going to affect our philanthropy. And it means that we will have difficulty in tracking foreign students. And we'll have difficulty in attracting quality foreign lecturers. We have to build more bridges with expertise coming from outside of Ghana. That's the harsh reality. And so if you've got an accredited medical school as opposed to an unaccredited one, the accredited one is going to attract not only more students, but better prepared lecturers and researchers who want to come for the right reason. I'm not interested in whether you are intended to come to the School of Medicine, dentistry, technology, to come to sunset, to retire. I want people to come and give 5, 6, 10 years of full energy. And so to get people who are in that mode, who want to come for the right reason, you have a better chance of getting them if you have an accredited than a non-accredited medical school.
I want to close with this particular question. What do you say to those in the diaspora who are thinking about going back to Guyana to serve at the university? I'm not sure how they should go about that process. Is there a process in place in which they can apply and,
There's not a process in place yet, but there's an individual. I did a reorganization which was approved in July. And in that reorganization, I said we need to have 3 rather than 2 deputy vice chancellors. We need to have an office of strategic initiatives. We need to have our own legal counsel. University of Guyana doesn't have its own lawyer. We need to have a civil engineer. The Office of Strategic Initiatives is headed by a Guyanese who remigrated to come work with me. Left a good job in Canada, made personal and financial sacrifices as I have.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Fitzgerald, popularly known as Jerry Yaw.
Oh, Jerry, yes.
So Jerry's office is the office that has a number of things, one of which would be help me identify folks, help me process folks who want to come back. So you can either write Jerry or write me. And people have been doing it. There are some people who we don't expect them to come back
Yes.
to live, but they want to come and do a sabbatical for a year or a semester. They want to come in the summer to give some technical expertise. They want to apply for a Fulbright. We've got a Fulbright scholar in the Faculty of Education and Humanities, Desiree DeFloriman. Left Ghana in 1968. Wants to come back. As a result of her coming back and serving as a Fulbright scholar, I got an email from a non-Guyanese, University of South Carolina. Vice Chancellor, I want to come and help. Non-Guyanese, she sent me her CV. She has done Fulbright professorships in Africa at the University of the West Indies. Her friend Desiree is there. She wants to come and help. So people have an opportunity to give back, whether Guyanese or non-Guyanese, not only by coming back to live, but coming back to serve a semester, giving technical assistance, giving advice, spending a year teaching. But, we need much more than people teaching.
Yes.
That Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning is one of those areas where you're going to need people who have got those experiences in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, coming to help. Under research, I've got a Guyanese from the University of Nottingham coming down in January. Penelope Siebert. She's bringing in a team. How can I help? She's in the business school at the University of Nottingham, but she does research on public health. So we're going to have her come down with some people from the business school, public health, to see how they can help on the research front. We need a lot of help in building back a culture of research.
Professor Griffith, once again, is always enlightening and educational. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me end, Selvin, by saying what I said at the beginning. Happy Thanksgiving to those who celebrated. Season's greetings to all who celebrated. And a wonderful New Year.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless.